good to start?
Yep.
Should we turn on the mics?
It's on.
Oh.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's right. All right, William, we've got quorum. Feel free to get us started.
Terrific. Welcome everyone to the September 14th meeting of the French Broad River MPO Technical Coordinating Committee. I'm William High, the Vice Chair. Autumn Radcliffe was unable to join us today, and my jury duty is off this morning, but don't worry, I get to go back to court later today. So here I am. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started with introductions. Again, I'm William High from Buncombe County. I'm the lead transportation planner, and I'm going to let Hannah take us around.
Okay. I just call roll first.
Sure.
Art Jessica Morris.
Here.
Buncombe County William High.
Still here.
Sorry. Buncombe Transit Dylan Casper.
Here now.
Flat Rock Pat Christie. Fletcher Eric Rufa.
Here.
Haywood County Jody Ferguson. Apple Country Transit Janet Van Cooley.
Here.
Maggie Valley Sam Cullen.
Here.
RPO Vicky Eastland. Here. Waynesville Elizabeth Teague. DOT Division 13 Brendan Marisu.
Here.
And Division 14 Steve Williams.
Hey, everybody.
I'll go through who's online, and then we'll just do a round robin of who's in the room. Adrian Eisenhower.
Here.
Angela Reeves.
Here.
Mike from Mills River. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your last name.
Here.
Everyone's moving around. Stephen Sparks. Matt Cable.
Here.
Is there anybody that I missed online? Y'all are all moving around.
Pat Christie's here.
And I believe Jessica Trotman joined us as well.
I'm here.
Okay. Do we want to go through who's in the room?
Yes.
Suzette, do you want to start?
Sure. Suzette Morales, Federal Highways. Asha Rado, Land and Sky Regional Council. Vicky Eastland, Land and Sky RPO.
Hannah Bagley, French Broad River MPO.
Scott Adams, French Broad River MPO.
Justin Winkler, French Broad River MPO.
John Bersanti, Land of Sky.
Joe Casper, Buncombe Transit.
Troy Wilson, NCDOT Division 14.
Brendan Marisu, NCDOT Division 13.
Recording in progress.
I think we're good.
Okay.
Okay. Is there any public comment at this time? All right, hearing none. Tristan, this is the updated agenda, or do we need to amend it?
This is the updated agenda. Just to note, something we sent out this morning was in addition to the consent agenda, that's a modification to the 2024 through 2033 TIP. The modification adds additional funding to FY24 for planning funds for our special studies. So just a note, in the last meeting, we amended the UPWP to transfer some of our special studies from FY23 to FY24. As part of that, a modification is needed to adjust those funds.
Okay, thank you, Tristan. Is there any discussion? All right, well, barring discussion, is there any motion to approve the agenda and the consent agenda?
This is Vicky,
Thank you, Vicky. Is there a second?
Second, Jana Biancoli.
Thank you, Jana. Hannah, would you do the honors?
Art, Jessica Morris.
Aye.
Black Mountain, Jessica Trotman.
Aye.
Buncombe County, William High.
Approve.
Buncombe Transit, Dylan Casper.
Approved.
TPD, Daniel Sellers. He said he's having technical difficulties. Flat Rock, Pat Christie.
Approve.
Fletcher, Eric Rufa.
Aye.
Haywood County, Jody Ferguson. Apple Country Transit, Jana Bianculi.
Aye.
Maggie Valley, Sam Cullen.
Aye.
RPO, Vicky Eastland.
Aye.
Waynesville, Elizabeth Teague.
Approve.
DOT Division 13, Brendan Mary Sue.
Approved.
And Division 14, Steve Williams.
Approved.
Your ayes have it.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you, everyone. With that, I will kick it off to Tristan for the business of the MPO.
Sure, you actually won't be hearing too much from me today. We have a few items. The first couple of items, I say you won't hear from me and then I talk. The first couple of items were actually intended to be part of the CTP and MTP update that we were getting ready to start. But as a reminder, we are now planning on hiring a consultant for that. However, we still went through the process of identifying needs for potential park and ride lots as well as wildlife crossings, so that those may be considered for projects submitted into SPOT as well as in the CTP and MTP. So with that, I will hand things off to John Barsanti, the TDM coordinator for the region, to talk about park and ride identified needs. Feel free to share, John.
Thank you. All right, everyone should be seeing what I'm seeing right now. My name is John Barsani. I'm the TDM coordinator here at Land of Sky, and I was tasked with finding places to install future park and ride locations after doing a survey of our existing park and ride locations. Park and rides go by a grand title here. For the most part, what we're talking about are two different things: park and rides, where people are able to connect with transit, and park and pools, where people are going to be able to carpool together. The Florida Department of Transportation has done a lot of work on this before with regard to park and rides, and they describe it very succinctly as commuters in the pursuit of ride-sharing, carpooling, van-pooling, bus, or rail transit. They also feel that it is very important to incorporate these facilities into any long-range plan so they become eligible to compete for funds. During the process of the last few months, I've identified 16 different park and pool locations where people would be able to carpool easily, and 12 park and rides. We gave them names, identifiers, and the last time I gave a presentation, we went through a ranking process to see which ones seemed to make the most sense for putting in park and ride, park and pool facilities. The reason why we're doing this is multifaceted. We're trying to improve the carpooling aspect and reduce single occupancy vehicle travel. We're trying to reduce congestion in congestion hotspots. The idea is to reduce fuel consumption, thereby reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and encouraging people to jump onto transit. Half of the ranking system was based on congestion and AADT. The other half was based on equity. There are 10 areas of the 28 that are already identified in our TIP project. We can incorporate park and rides in some of these locations. The areas identified were just as a general placeholder to say in these areas we need to have at least address the possibility of including park and ride. There are also 2 areas that are in discussion in the RPO, the Augusta Bypass area and the Turkey Pen Shelter area for park and rides in those areas. The reason why we are needing to do this is we have a large concentration of people living outside of the area in the 25 to 50 mile range, 16,900 people in Jackson, McDowell, Rutherford, and Haywood counties. This also includes people within our general region in Madison and Transylvania counties. There's a larger scope outside the area where 30,333 people are living 50 miles or more outside of the area. This includes Catawba, Caldwell, Cleveland, Gaston, Macon, Mecklenburg, and Watauga counties. We have an interesting situation where if you did not know that the 2 maps illustrated right here are different, you would think they were 100% the same or very close to. The one on the left is the people who work in Charlotte and they call our region home. And then the one on the right is for people who call this area home and work elsewhere. The activity is clustered in areas around where we're proposing park and rides or park and pools, so we can help people both within the area and outside the region carpool to and from. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Hey, John, I have a question. Elizabeth.
Yes, please.
Your chart's only showing 1 park and ride in Waynesville at Hyatt Creek Road. And there's an existing park and ride off of Russ Avenue and Smoky Park, Smoky.
Right, these are the proposed park and rides. These are
Okay, so
proposed park and
the
rides.
chart is only showing those that are proposed?
Correct.
Okay. So if there's overlap between the chart that's proposed and the ones that already exist, what's happening there? Is it just proposals for improvement?
One of the areas that I'm looking at for improvement is the area out in Black Mountain. That park and ride is rarely used. It's mostly used as a parking lot on the other side of the tracks from downtown. And if we could move it closer to the expressway, we might get more usage there. But that's also a place where we've identified in previous meetings that it's possible that we just need to have better signage to get people there from the expressway, and once they're there to realize that it's part of the share of the ride NC grouping.
Okay.
There are options, Elizabeth, where we can add and see if it has any impact on the existing park and rides. Some regions around the country, they look at this and they say, well, if we've got underperforming locations, then close them down and open up new ones. So that's up to you. The idea is to get these locations put into a plan so that when improvements are coming along, we're able to say, we could put a new park and ride here in this location, or we need to update others.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
I have something.
Yes.
Just in one of your maps, I don't know which one, there was like a red or orange, like diamond shaped, not this one. Keep going.
That one?
Yeah, what is that?
That's just the placeholder that the census on the map uses to come up with basically a center of the 5-county area.
Oh, okay. Okay,
Detroit, that's all.
okay. The physical center.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions right now?
Hey, John, just a real quick one. This is Elizabeth again. I'm looking at your counties. Is there a particular effort for people who are going to Western Carolina University and that particular commuter traffic?
West Haywood County.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything specific, but I do think that having park and rides, especially for that Haywood County to Jackson County connection, would be pretty key. The connection between Haywood County and Jackson County is pretty significant in terms of the amount of travel as well as the amount of commuters. So I do think the recommendation of Hyatt Creek, even though there's nothing that we can conclusively say will definitely get WCU students, I think it's very likely it will.
And this goes, Elizabeth, to what I was saying later on in the presentation and what I've said before is that if you look at the commuter patterns that we have, there are opportunities to work with other regions, and working between counties is going to be probably our first step. Working between regions will be a second step.
Yeah, thank you.
I think one other thing to point out is that according to the census data, there's about 17,000 people in our region who report as having carpooling as their primary means of getting to work. That's a number that has been falling off over the years. And so, I think part of that speaks to the role of TDM, that we need to try to incentivize and make things convenient for people to have options outside of just one person, one car. So I think in terms of how this, is addressing CDM strategies, I think this is something we don't talk a ton about. But when you look at some of the facilities like the Marsville Park and Ride, the Canton Park and Ride, and the Roslyn Park and Ride especially, those are facilities that are often filling up and sometimes going into overflow areas. So I think making sure that we're providing for those options is something that we need to do more work on to help stop the reduction in people carpooling to work. But we are looking for a recommendation to the board for these identified needs.
Okay, would anyone like to make a motion for a recommendation?
This is Steve Williams. I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Steve. Do we have a second?
This is Elizabeth. I'll make that second.
Sounded like Elizabeth and Vicky. So Asha, I'm going to leave that up to you.
Give it a whip.
Okay.
Asheville, Lucy Crown.
Aye.
What?
Art, Jessica Morris.
Aye.
Black Mountain, Jessica Trotman.
Aye.
Buncombe County, William High.
Approve.
Buncombe Transit, Dylan Casper.
Approved.
TPD, Daniel Sellers.
Approved.
Flat Rock, Pat Christie.
Approve.
Fletcher Eric Rufa,
Aye.
Haywood County Jody Ferguson, Henderson County Autumn Radcliffe,
Aye.
Apple Country Transit Jana Van Cooley,
Aye.
Maggie Valley Sam Cullen,
Aye.
Mills River Mike Malachek,
Approve.
RPO Vicky Eastland,
Aye.
Waynesville Elizabeth Teague,
Approve.
Division 13 Brendan Mary Sue,
Approved.
and Division 14 Steve Williams.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Terrific. Thank you all. Item 4B, wildlife crossings.
Okay, Scott just stepped out, he'll be back in a second, but, I'll give a quick intro. So, this is something, that's kind of in the same vein as the park and rides. A lot of times we get into projects, have project budgets, and then realize that, having wildlife crossing facilities of some sort, would be great to have. So I think part of this is trying to identify some of these needs before we start having projects getting developed, to at least have some information to start with as we get into these projects. Scott has been working with the Wildlands Network and land conservancies in the region to identify a lot of these locations. There has been a lot of work on wildlife crossings lately. I think a year or two ago, we had representatives from the wildlands location and the I-40 Safe Passage Group present to the TCC as well as the board. We know that our region has seen a lot of wildlife collisions, especially on our interstates. So I think this topic is something that really speaks to some of our goals of improving safety on our roads, as well as trying to be cognizant of the potential impacts on the natural environment. So with that, I'll hand it off to Scott.
Sure. So did you want to maybe bring up the presentation?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, can everyone hear me and see my screen? Maybe just get a quick verbal or a... Okay. So yeah, I'm going to just briefly go over some sort of high-level overviews of wildlife crossings, and then give a couple of details of a report that I've just finished, which will be made available to you all shortly. Actually, following on this meeting, Tristan, myself, and Vicki are meeting with staff from both Wildlands Network and the National Parks Conservation Association staff. Those two groups were instrumental in the I-40 study, which I'll give some information on in a minute. But just for a quick overview, and again, some of this is very obvious to you all as the TCC, but this presentation is also intended ultimately for the board in a modified version. But just a quick reminder on what the MPO and the RPO are really focused on. The 3C process being comprehensive, cooperative, and continuous. That's definitely a part of incorporating things like park and ride, like wildlife crossings. And in terms of where this is fitting in, this is just an overview of Tristan's famous disc and pie slide. And really what we're trying to do is front load these considerations into both the CTP and MTP, and ultimately into the SPOTS process, which informs the STIP and TIP. As to why this is important, this can really be compared to, I think in some ways, NCDOT's Complete Streets policy. It's really trying to look at an additional framework for routine accommodation, and whether you've got an interest
and wildlife conservation, a concern with human safety. Certainly, if you're hitting any kind of large mammal at a high speed, that's a rough proposition for both parties involved. And then just the dollars and cents economics of it. And this is just a quote from a famous wildlife researcher that says, no matter who you are, where you live, or what you do for a living, you're going to care about at least one of these three factors. And of course, routine accommodation, at least in the lens of complete streets, often happens through resurfacing, maintenance, or new construction. And those three activities are actually good parallels for opportunities for wildlife crossings. So just a brief overview of what we're talking about. So sometimes these two terms can get confused, and I think we're meeting with Ron Sutherland from Wildlands Network later today, and I think he makes an important distinction that the wildlife corridor is where animals are moving through, and that's on the right there. That's just a quick illustration of the red and yellow areas, which I'll describe a little bit more in a minute. Those are large-scale wildlife corridors that have been identified by Wildlands Network. A wildlife road crossing is a specific instance where you've either got an underpass, overpass, or some other set of measures for that. So why are we looking at this now? To always introduce a new acronym, there's the acronym WVCs, that's Wildlife Vehicle Crashes. That's the technical term that folks in the area of road ecology apply to what happens when an animal and a human are involved in a crash, most typically by driving. They're costly, and they can be prevented through a lot of different elements. And currently, through the IIJA, or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, there is a wildlife crossings pilot program. This is just a brief overview, which I can share with the group. It's a PDF that was put together by Animal ARC Solutions. That's I cannot remember the acronym. It's Animal Resource Crossing, I believe. I'll have to double check that. But essentially, this is a new pilot program which Wildlands Network is looking at applying for in the next cycle. And this study and the recommendations will certainly inform any future applications for that. In terms of the costs, again, depending on the size of an animal that you're hitting, ranging from a deer to an elk in this region, a moose in other regions, it's a fairly high cost proposition, both in terms of the active incident in which it happens and the follow-up cost of either hospital stays or different things like that. Looking more specifically in North Carolina, we've had just shy of 60,000 wildlife vehicle collisions just in the last handful of years. It's about $160 million of property damage, 28 human injuries, and 5 fatalities. Two recent studies that I incorporated into my report that both Wildlands Network and the National Forest Conservation Association have done were on the I-40 corridor in the Victor River Gorge, and then that was just last summer in June. And then in September, Wildlands Network released a statewide study for North Carolina. The Victor River Gorge study, just for a quick overview, was basically, it straddled both Tennessee and North Carolina. I was looking at 13 sites in North Carolina, 7 in Tennessee. The 4 priority sites that were identified in North Carolina, I call out in the report, and that's also in the packet. In terms of, just a specific instance of looking at the Herman-Denton Bridge, which is actively being reconstructed right now, these are just some of the factors that went into looking at that from a wildlife crossing perspective. In terms of the statewide study, there's an interesting statistic in there basically stating wherever you're able to determine there are 5 deer vehicle collisions or 2 elk vehicle collisions per mile per year, the cost of even just what's called deflection fencing, can exceed the cost of the crashes. Again, just looking at the average cost of a crash there. The statewide study came up with 155 priorities across the state, including the top 20 5 of which are in the land and sky region. But in terms of types of crossings, it can range from anything like this fairly extensive overpass. I believe this is on Interstate 90 in Montana. But of course, you could do something as simple as signs and what's called deflection fencing. That's the technical term of art. It's basically when you're putting up fencing along a roadway to prevent animals crossing at a certain point, and if you're trying to funnel and guide them to a more preferable grade crossing, or again, under, over, or something like that. It's really trying to look at a lot of these like a buffet of choices, and that's largely what I did in the report, just looking at different applications based on, existing NCDOT roadway structures that were there. This is just a quick overview. Obviously, if you've got a standard MUTCD warning sign, that's a relatively low cost. In some instances, it's got a relatively high benefit. You can have interactive signs, like this example on the right from CDOT in Colorado, and that, of course, you can see on the right there is some fencing associated with that corridor. This is a little bit of a busy slide, but I really just want to emphasize that as a driver, your perception reaction time is key. This is actually the photo there is an example from the Netherlands, essentially warning drivers that there is a gap coming up in deflection fencing. So it's sort of a quick visual cue to be on the lookout for wildlife crossing in that area. Essentially, time and speed are always key elements of any element of driver safety. If you've got slower speed, you've got more time to stop. If you've got higher speed but a greater field of vision, then you at least have more time to potentially stop. And I just bring up a specific example from the study. So US 64 at Panther Mountain in Transylvania County is one of the Wildlands Network's identified sites. And what I've tried to do here is illustrate that image on the left is, what's sometimes referred to as your cone of vision. As you're driving, what you can see 20 feet out versus 240 feet out is obviously a bit more. On the right there, if you're looking at horizontal or vertical curvature of a road, that's another element for what you can see in terms of your sight distance. And what I'm really illustrating there on the map with the dashed blue lines, this is a theoretical placement of deflection fencing at areas of curvature on the road where you are just not going to have as much time to both see and react to an animal on the road and also stop. But perhaps if you had a bit of straightaway where that double-sided arrow is crossing, that could represent an opening in the fencing that through a funneling and encouragement aspect, from either side of the road, those sort of squiggly lines are just a general representation of, let's say, a deer or some other, or some other small animal even that's, trying to cross the road. You're really trying to look at opportunities to basically set up specific crossing opportunities and trying to eliminate more dangerous crossing opportunities on curves. So this is just a quick example of one of the recommendations from the study, again, which you'll get shortly. But I also should note that part of the study was trying to look at current traffic levels and projected traffic levels from the MPO's last travel demand model. At least in this segment, the traffic is predicted to almost double, 7,300 to 13,600. So that's also very much a factor in trying to map out specific locations and physical roadway installations or other things like that for wildlife safety. Again, underpasses, it can be something as fancy as constructing a newly multi-tiered wide opening shown there on the right. Sometimes, though, even existing culverts can be retrofitted, particularly for smaller wildlife crossings, and also for animals that get finicky about wet feet. There's a term that's in the study called a level bench. Essentially, it's where you just build either out of concrete or something else, a dry level bench in a culvert for animals that want a dry crossing through a culvert versus a wet crossing. Also to note there that natural bottom culverts are more effective at supporting aquatic species. If you've seen any research, particularly from Oregon and Washington on salmon habitat and roadway retrofits, oftentimes if there's an existing corrugated metal or concrete culvert, for replacement schedules, the preference is to have a natural rough bottom culvert, again, for fish and other aquatic species. In terms of bridges and overpasses, again, it can run the gamut from trying to retrofit an existing one, where you've got either a wider shelf on one side or the other. The Harmon Bend Bridge on I-40 was exactly that. Essentially, I can't remember if it was one or both sides of that were essentially retrofitted with a relatively smooth path amidst a lot of riprap for wildlife. Daylight and natural vegetation screening can also be important considerations for bridge and other underpasses. In terms of bridges and overpasses, oftentimes if you're trying to look at it from both the wildlife crossing aspect and then also hydrology and flooding considerations, that instance down there on the bottom shows a bridge in Florida that's got a fairly wide area of passage, both for, I believe, any flooding considerations, and then also, again, you're seeing the deflection fencing there that's actively encouraging a crossing under the bridge versus going up onto the bank, over the bridge, and back down. And of course, and we're not just focusing always on the big critters, although those are most critical for any kind of high-speed crash. But this is just a quick example from Wildlands Network in Gorgeous State Park, where unrelatedly, 3 small concrete culverts were installed, presumably for drainage under a park road, and Wildlands Network has placed cameras along there recording armadillos, bobcats, rattlesnakes, and turtles using these. And it's definitely, this specific area of the park has been cited as an area of high reptile mortality. So even if a snake or a turtle's got the opportunity to go under the road versus across it, that's a good thing. In terms of what works, obviously fencing and under overpasses have a pretty high success rate. Depending on how signs and other combinations of fencing are placed, you can get a still pretty decent safety return on investment, about 26%. In terms of reflectors and whistles or different things like that, it's not as high. So in terms of the details, this is just a high-level overview map of that acronym there is BRF, that's Blue Ridge Forever /WN Wildlands Network. This was a composite of different values that they mapped out, either things like aquatic habitat, ridges, protected lands. That's what you're seeing in the red-orange, or the yellow, the yellow being the first priority corridors, and the number 2 or red-orange reflecting secondary primary corridors. And again, they're largely following things like ridges or valleys, waterways, and protected lands. So just for a quick view into some of the details from the report and the maps, which again will be made available shortly, this looked at both where public lands were, looked at those corridors that have been identified. NCDOT has a fairly extensive mapping inventory of animal crashes. The only hitch is that they don't detail the types of animals in the crashes, or at least in the for quick glance GIS data. But this is taking a quick look at the I-40 Pigeon River Gorge corridor, and the 2 maps are showing the same thing. It's just the different attributes that are in them. So in that lower right, you're seeing Pigeon River Bridge highlighted, and then on the right, for that same location, it's a combination of deflection fencing and a level bench path underneath the bridge that are recommended. Taking another look at the Pigeon River Gorge study, again, just trying to use quick identifiers. So I figured for the purposes of a quick ID on the county, it'd just be a short truncated word for the county plus number. That's just showing the location HACO 7. It's deflection fencing for a level bench path. This area, HACO 14, it's labeled for Haywood County, but it's actually right at the Haywood County-Buncombe County border, and this is also next to Chestnut Mountain Park in Canton, which is immediately south of here. What this slide is showing is just the details of some of the existing NCDOT structures that are along there. So, for instance, on your left, you've got a triple 8.5 by 11 reinforced concrete box culvert, that's RCDC. Further along the road, you've got an 8 by 14 vehicular underpass, and there on 1923, there's another reinforced concrete box culvert. I put the crossing actually specifically at the county line because that's actually, and the reason I have the topo turned on is that's actually where the county line is actually running down to a valley, and there's also the opportunity there with Hominy Creek for a crossing opportunity. That would require the installation of new dry culverts underneath I-40 and Spencer 23, but again, in terms of looking at the existing infrastructure and then also trying to look at the likelihood of where animals are crossing, that's the basis of that recommendation. And of course, later this afternoon, I will be really curious to meet with Wildlands Network staff to get their first blush reaction on some of these that are outside of their identified study areas. Lastly, I'll just include a very specific instance of a planned overpass by NCDOT. This is further west at the Stokoa Gap overpass. I'm not sure of the current construction status of this, but it's an interesting combo of relocating the Appalachian Trail over the roadway and also, as you can see there in the renderings with the deflection fencing and whatnot, making this potentially wildlife friendly. And with that, thank you for your attention and interest, and I'll be glad to take any questions or run back through. I think there's a couple of questions in the chat.
I think it's mostly connectivity issues.
Okay.
All right, is there any questions or discussion? Okay, and we are not looking for a motion here, is that correct?
We are asking for a recommendation to the board on these identified needs.
Okay. Well, if anyone would like to offer a motion to recommend this to the board, I believe we will entertain it.
Hi, this is Elizabeth Teague. I'd recommend that.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Can someone provide a second? Unless there's further discussion.
This is Daniel, I'll second.
Thank you, Dylan and Daniel. I'll let Asha figure that one out. Great. Hannah, would you please take us away?
Asheville, Lucy Crown.
Aye.
R. Jessica Morris.
Aye.
Black Mountain, Jessica Trotman.
Aye.
Buncombe County, William High.
Approve.
Buncombe Transit, Dylan Casper.
Approved.
TPD, Daniel Sellers.
Aye.
Flat Rock, Pat Christie.
Aye.
Fletcher, Eric Russo.
Aye.
Haywood County, Jody Ferguson. Henderson County, Autumn Radcliffe.
Aye.
Apple Country Transit, Jana Van Cooley.
Aye.
Maggie Valley, Sam Cullen.
Aye.
Mills River, Mike Malachek.
Approve.
RPO, Vicki Eastland.
Aye.
Waynesville, Elizabeth Teague.
Approve.
DOT Division 13, Brendan Merrithew.
Approved.
And Division 14, Steve Williams. He's having connectivity issues as well, so. He said approve in the chat. The ayes have it.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, thank you all. Let's move on to item 4C, 5307.
And I will hand that one off to Scott as well.
Okay. Let me present screen again. Can everyone see that? A quick verbal yes, somebody?
Looks good.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So this is just a quick update on the 5307 urbanized area transit funding stream from MTA. Met just actually yesterday, no, sorry, 2 days ago, really 2 days ago, weeks running together. We have a 5307 subrecipient work group. Met with them on this actually earlier this spring and just checked in with them yesterday ahead of this meeting on the formula, which I'll go over briefly. Basically, this is the process for how the designated recipients, which is the city of Asheville, and subrecipients receive their portions of this funding stream for transit. Just as a brief overview, that acronym UZA, that's urbanized areas, that's the census designated term for urbanized areas. And Asheville is changing, or actually recently changed. But for areas with a population greater than 200,000, there's an entity that's noted as a designated recipient. The city of Asheville is the current designated recipient for the Asheville urbanized area. So for areas that have less than 200,000 people, those funds come directly from the state. And what I'm illustrating here is basically the Federal Transit Administration. Right now, the running average has been about $4 million a year to the urbanized area for 5307 funds. The MPO's role in that is to determine the percentage allocation to the direct recipient and the subrecipients based upon an agreed formula. Additionally, the MPO holds a call for projects for JARC funding, that's Jobs Access Reverse Commute funding. The local policy on that has been to allocate 10% of 5307 funds to that pot of money. And these percentages illustrated here are the, until recently, current percentages that each entity has been receiving. There's a note and a shading there on Haywood County, just noting that Haywood County is currently phasing out of 5307 eligibility with this fiscal year due to changes in the urbanized area. I do have a note there that the county may become eligible, again, depending on the outcomes of Census 2030. But essentially, funds are going from FDA being reviewed by the MPO. The city of Asheville is the designated recipient, and these entities here, Buncombe County and Henderson County, are the subrecipients. So just for a brief overview, in 2017, the MPO and its transit partners conducted a study to agree upon a funding formula for 5307 funds. There were 9 alternatives considered, and alternative 9 was decided on to be the operating formula. Essentially, it's illustrated here. It's a formula that is calculated without revenue miles. And just a quick note on why that was done. That was done because revenue miles for demand response service versus fixed route service are often calculated differently. Demand response revenue miles are calculated as soon as the vehicle leaves a bus yard for its first pickup. Fixed route service does not start calculating revenue miles until it goes into service at its first stop. So it's a quick insight on the sort of the differences of the apples and oranges between those two types of transit service. With Census 2020, the Asheville urbanized area changed, and a critical part of that is what's called hops and jumps. This is, I believe you all have seen this through various iterations on the updates to both the urbanized area and the planning area, but this is just a reminder that we have a federally designated urbanized area. That's critical for all different kinds of transportation funding, but notably 5307 funding. The planning area for the MPO includes the urbanized area and a 20-year area of expected growth. Just as a reminder, just at last month's board meeting, the planning area boundary was updated Those small blue geographies that you're seeing on the map are census block groups. Those were used as the basis for the boundary update. If you're looking in South Haywood County, kind of with that squiggly line around those coves, the previous boundary was done on watersheds, which unfortunately don't correspond that often with census geographies, and that makes quite the headache for any kind of demographic analysis. So this was the rhyme and reason behind the boundary changes. These were the resulting changes. On the left there, that's the previous boundary. On the right there, in red is the MPO boundary. Everything in orange is the resulting RPO boundary. Going back to specifics on the census, the criteria for what's considered urban and what is considered rural changed between 2010 and 2020. Notably on what are called hops and jumps, the criteria dropped from 2.5 miles for the 2010 census to 1.5 miles for the 2020 census. So what does that mean? This area highlighted right here on the edge of Canton and Candler was the critical juncture between what used to be all one urbanized area, basically downtown Asheville to downtown Hazelwood, to then becoming two separate urbanized areas. As of 2020, Waynesville has its own urbanized area. Canton and Brevard, well, Brevard's always been its own urbanized cluster. It's now called an urbanized area, complete and separate from Asheville. But the implication for transit funding for Haywood County is that because per census designation, those are separate, Haywood County is now outside of the Asheville urbanized area. What you're seeing here is from the census. So this, apologize, I'm kind of colorblind, light green, gray blob is the Asheville urbanized area. This bluish area is the urbanized areas within Haywood County. Just as a quick overview of what grew, what shrank, Asheville's urbanized area actually shrank, and in very small detail, again on that hop and jump, you can probably see just little flecks of red. Just a quick look at where things are expected to change over the next 20 years. Again, that's a big question about that jump or skip between Haywood County and Buncombe County right there with the Metro Canton Candler area. In terms of numbers that have changed, again, the urbanized area between 2010, they're in orange. Actually, we shrank in area, but we grew in population a bit for the actual urbanized area. And the update that we're doing, that we've just done just now, is taking the urbanized area populations for the entities that are in the current urbanized area. Those are taken from Census Form P2, so that's a special census-derived population number. So this is the critical slide that's got the biggest element of information. So again, Haywood County for the as of this fiscal year is leaving the urbanized area. They're still eligible for transit funding, but it's through the state, not through this direct allocation of 5307 funding. There on this chart, you're seeing that these are the percentage split outs with Haywood County noted in at about 8% of that funding. As of last fiscal year, that's FY23, with this fiscal year, the percentages with Haywood County leaving are now going up for the three remaining recipients. So the city of Asheville goes from 42.6 to 46.9, Buncombe County from 28.6 to 31.9, and Henderson County going from 20.4 to 21.2. This was just a brief overview of the options that were discussed with the 5307 group. Basically, it was three options presented: continue with the current formula, albeit with updated census and NTD, National Transit Database numbers. Option two, look at picking one of the other formulas, or option three, starting with a completely new funding formula study. Just as a note, the last study was right about $70,000 with an 80-20 split between MPO funds and local funds. So just following on, yes, the two day ago discussion with the 5307 subrecipient group, There was agreement on continuing on for the time being with the current formula. There was discussion at looking at trying to get more uniformity in the National Transit Database information that's used to inform the formula. And lastly, there was discussion of looking at the total funding picture. For instance, City of Asheville using additional local funds from their general fund, also looking at which agencies are available for different state programs, ROAP, that's ROAP, it's Rural Operating Assistance Program, that's obviously only available to rural systems, SMEF, that's State Maintenance Assistance Program. I believe that's available uniformly to all agencies, but there was, again, just the discussion trying to look at all funding streams available going into the formula. So with that, I can pause and take any questions. I do have a few other slides just with any deep dive questions if you all have them.
Okay, any questions at this time or desire to see the deep dive slides?
I do have a question.
Yes.
The RPO, well, Haywood County is a state situation, but always the RPO has worked with Haywood County on rural transit issues. But with their change in their situation, do we know when the 5307, 2021, and 2022 funds will be programmed? Because based on census, they are still eligible to get 21, 22, and I believe 23 funding.
So
they can use that to continue their urban route.
And by programming, you mean having their grant applications put into the FTA?
Yes, yes.
Jessica or someone from the city, are you able to address that question?
No, not, I'm not sure of the status of that at the moment. I know we've lost another person, so we're struggling with that, but I'll check in with Amber and see if we've made any progress on it.
But to your question, I mean, the funding is still there. Yeah, I think that's the point. Is I mean, there's still money. There's still funds in that balance. That,
right.
To my understanding.
Just for clarity, they estimate that it costs approximately $225 to $250 to run their route, their urban route for a year. So with the chart you put up, they have 305-ish thousand for
the last.
Yeah, that
right.
have not been programmed yet. So that would give them, a significant amount of money that they could continue to fund that route.
Right, just so the group's cognizant, I think one thing we've been working through with Haywood County is that because they'll be switching from 5307 to 5311 funding, or I should say solely 5311 funding, one question they've kind of asked is how much 5307 funding do they have remaining, and how long do they have to spend that funding? We've been talking with NCDOT. Their plan is to, at least for the first year, I think the phrase they was to make them whole with 5311 funding. That's 1 year. And so I think after that, there's a lot of questions about how much funding Haywood County is going to have going forward and whether or not their fixed route is still going to be tenable. Just as a reminder, the fixed route was reestablished because that was one of the requirements of the 5307 program. And it's something where I think the last things I've seen is ridership has been pretty solid.
It's a third of their annual trips currently.
Right. I think the last thing I saw was somewhere around 35,000 trips per year. And so I think that's a key question for Haywood County to help them plan out what kind of system and what kind of service they can expect over the next several years.
Yeah, and that's definitely also, we met with them earlier spring and had time on us from ITRI to to speak to that exact point. And my last understanding from NCDU TIMD was that it was a TBD situation, at least in terms of 5311 funding.
Right. Because, I mean, not only has that affected our region, the census changes, it's affected other regions. There's one new MPO, there's been contraction and expansion in different areas, so the state now has to see what their new rural allocation or fixed income allocation is and how that's going to be, shared out, so.
Right, and so, yeah, I mean, there is a lot of uncertainty, I think, in a lot of different realms about how much funding there's going to be going forward. That's part of why the FY24 apportionment in this chart is going. Just to point out, even though our urbanized area increased by a little more than 2% in population, the rest of the state's urban population increased significantly more. And so that's going to play a part in terms of how much 5307 funding our region gets. So even though with the proposed updated formula before you all today, we'll have a good idea, or we'll know what the percentages are going to be. We don't know how much funding that's going to be until that FY24 apportionment comes out from FTA. Besides all of these various points, I think Matt Cable's on, Jana, Jessica, Autumn, anything else regarding 5307 you all think should be discussed?
Okay, well, if there's not further discussion, is there a motion to recommend this funding allocation formula to the board?
This is Vicki, I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Vicki. Is anyone prepared to second?
Dylan, I should adopt that.
Thank you, Dylan. In that case, Hannah, would you mind to take us around?
Asheville, Lucy Crown.
Aye.
R. Jessica Morris.
Aye.
Black Mountain, Jessica Trotman.
Aye.
Buncombe County, William High.
Approve.
Buncombe Transit, Dylan Casper.
Approved.
PPD, Daniel Sellers.
Aye.
Flat Rock, Pat Christie.
Aye.
Fletcher, Eric Rufa.
Aye.
Haywood County, Jody Ferguson. Henderson County, Autumn Radcliffe.
Aye.
Apple Country Transit, Jana Van Cooley.
Aye.
Maggie Valley, Sam Cullen.
Aye.
Mills River, Mike Malachek.
Approve.
RPO, Vic Eastland.
Aye.
Waynesville, Elizabeth Teague. UT Division 13, Brendan Merrithew.
Approved.
And Division 14, Steve Williams. I think he's still having connectivity issues.
Okay, well,
You go with the ayes have it.
all right, great. Thank you all. Let's move on to item 4D, designation of Great Trail State Day.
With that, I'll hand it off to Hannah.
So as most of you all know, 2023 was designated as North Carolina Year of the Trail, and there's been tons of events happening throughout the year. October 21st is the Great Trail State Day, And it is a Saturday that encourages people to get out on trails, whether that be hiking, biking, walking, paddling, all of the above. A lot of jurisdictions have declared October 21st as the Great Trails State Day, and we are looking for a motion to designate that October 21st as our own Great Trails State Day. There is a proclamation in your agenda packet, and we are looking for a motion to approve that proclamation and send that on to the board. Is there any questions about the Great Trails State Day? That's like a mouthful.
If there's no questions or discussion, I think we'll entertain a motion to recommend this to the board.
I recommend this to the board. This is
Thank you, Lucy. Is there a second? Thank you, Dylan, and maybe someone else too. Hannah, if you would take us around.
Asheville Lucy Crown.
Aye.
Art Jessica Morris.
Aye.
Black Mountain Jessica Trotman.
Aye.
Buncombe County William High.
Greatly approved.
Buncombe Transit Dylan Casper. TPD Daniel Sellers.
Aye.
Flat Rock Pat Christie.
Aye.
Fletcher Eric Rufa.
Aye.
Haywood County Jody Ferguson. Henderson County Autumn Radcliffe.
Aye.
Apple Country Transit Janet Van Cooley.
Aye.
Maggie Valley Sam Cullen.
Aye.
Mills River Mike Malachek.
Approve.
RPO Eastland.
Aye.
Waynesville Elizabeth Teague, I think she might have dropped off. Division 13 Brendan Merrithew.
Approved.
And Division 14 Steve Williams.
Approved.
The ayes have it.
All right, thank you all. With that, we'll take it to regular updates. Can we start with Division 13, please?
All right, thank you. I'll just, I'm filling in for Hannah today. I've got some limited updates, but if you have any questions, let me know. I may not know the answers, but I can try to get them to you quickly. Starting with the I-47, so I-26 widening, concrete paving activities continue from the French Broad River to NC 191, and work continues for the removal and grading of the eastbound lanes. That's from Long Shoals to Airport. There are no upcoming, at least for the next month or so, shifts out there scheduled, just so you know. And also, a lot of people ask about that Blue Ridge Parkway Bridge that's cantilevered, and there hasn't been a lot of activity on there lately, but work is going to resume within about a month or so on that section. In Buncombe County, the Amboy Bridge sidewalk project started, and I don't know if y'all have been monitoring that at all, but there's a one-way alternating signal there. They installed a temporary signal out there, so traffic can only proceed over that bridge in one direction at a time, alternating. But there is a 30-day limit to how long the contractor has to complete that job, and I don't have any indication right now if it's going to be faster than that, or if so, how much, but we'll keep an eye on that one. The Charlotte Street exit over here by downtown Asheville is proceeding. It was originally going to let as one contract, but it was broken up into different parts, the striping, the concrete work, and the signalization. So our maintenance forces have done some of the paving, the actual widening out there, but the schedule on that is they're going to be working out there for another month or so is my most up-to-date indication. And then, but once that's done, there'll be pedestrian crossings on almost all legs out there, and the 2 dedicated right turn lanes. Those were the main construction updates I have, but certainly if there are questions about any specific projects, please let me know. And then in general, the I-26 connector project, we're going to see portions of that let at the end of the year and into February. The design build portion, the B and D section, which are the new bridges over the French Broad River and Riverside Drive, in spring of next year or thereabouts. Sweeten Creek Road, projects like Sweeten Creek Road and the Amboy Road project are, they're being evaluated, but they've kind of been pushed out in the schedule. We're picking back up with Sweeten Creek Road. So, and just so you know, if any of these projects that have been on hold for, quite some time, when we kick them back off, we will do all the coordination again with stakeholders and involvement with everybody. If you were involved in those projects previously, you will be again as we move forward. So just my general updates. I don't have anything specific unless there are questions.
Good questions. Yes. On the Amboy Road Bridge, can you remind me, or I guess remind the group, there's a long-term full bridge replacement project for that? What's the timeline for that?
So that is I was just looking at that. We have a let date of 2028 for that. So that project, the planning activities will pick up again. And that's an example of one where we'll have to kind of just not start over, but get back to the room and with everybody and see where we are and how we move forward. So yeah, the bridge will be completely replaced on new location.
Great. And on the I-26 connector, in terms of, I guess, publicly available alignment maps, are those planned to be released in the next while? I only ask because I'm full disclosure, I'm a West Asheville resident. I've had neighbors of mine asking me about what's on the NCDOT website, and I can't even answer, what's available.
The conceptual maps are up for the public hearing, several years ago.
Right.
Regarding actual plans and alignments, so for the B and D section, those are design build, so they're being developed or will be developed once the contract is let. But there are for the A portions up to Haywood Road, so not some of it West Asheville beyond that.
Right.
We have them. I don't believe they're posted on a publicly facing site. They can always be requested.
Okay.
Are those part of the record of decision packet?
The maps. I don't know.
There are maps part of the packet, but yeah, it's definitely, we've communicated this to Kevin Moore, the project manager, but yeah, it's, I think keeping people up to date on, what's in or what's not, I think has been, challenging. So whatever can be done to help keep people updated on what's going on and what are the plans.
Thanks.
Thank you, Brandon. Is there any other questions? Okay, hearing none, let's move on to Division 14.
Hopefully y'all can hear me. Our internet at the division office has been kind of unstable for the last week or so. In Haywood County, the bridges that the first project there, if you remember, those are the bridges that were designed and then now they're redesigned, and they are scheduled to let later this year. Otherwise, it's kind of the same projects that you've been seeing for a while. The dates are the latest that are pulled from the new STIP. So some of those have shifted around just a little bit. And if anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to cover. All right, hearing none, going to construction. Haywood County, the Walnut and Main project is nearing completion. I think it'll actually be built of that 2020 2024 completion date. If you're traveling on I-40, please be aware of the resurfacing projects. They have been causing some traffic issues and some crashes. And of course, after you get out of the resurfacing project, then you, if you're going towards Tennessee, you transition into the bridge construction projects, which do have wildlife crossings underneath. So please be aware if you're traveling that corridor. The I-26 project, kind of the same updates we've been doing for a while. Just be aware of traffic shifts as the concrete pavement schedule gets completed on one side and then shifting traffic to the other. And if you're going towards South Carolina, be aware of the Green River Bridge project. Currently, there are still lanes open in each direction. I think Troy's there, and he can correct me if I'm saying anything wrong on that. But we do expect traffic to shift to the center between the two bridges later this year or in the spring of next year. Highland Lake Road project is proceeding fairly relatively quickly now once it finally got started. That completion date at the end of this year probably will be pushed out, but we'll just have to do this in the next couple of months. Anybody have any questions for any of that, or Troy, would you like to add anything?
I have nothing to add.
Great, thanks, y'all.
Okay, thanks very much. Daniel, do you have any updates for us?
No updates this month. Tristan told me to hold everything for next month, so you'll hear from me then.
Okay, then.
Yeah, to Daniel's reference point, one thing that's been worked on is updating the transportation analysis zones that are part of the traffic demand model for the region. So Daniel and others of the Transportation Planning Division have been working with us on updating those zones so that they're a little more in line with census boundaries and other best practices for transportation analysis zones. But that'll come back through next month.
Okay, great. Are any of our federal partners with us today?
Yes, we have Suzette from FHWA.
Great, I'll let y'all take it away.
Okay, thank you. I have some updates for you. I sent it, I guess, last week to Tristan. Oh, great, it's up there. Okay, so I'll touch on a few things. One of is the STA announced $13.4 million, so it's that last one that you can see down there. $13.4 million for funding for transit-oriented development planning. So that was announced on August 7th. Deadline is October 10th, and what's great about this is provides funding to local communities to integrate land use and transportation planning with a new fixed guideway or core capacity transit capital investment. So again, that application is due on the 10th of October. There are two other ones that's upcoming soon, their deadlines. That's the Reconnecting Communities. That one's due on the 28th of September. With this one, they've combined both the Rural and Tribal Assistant Pilot Program and the Neighborhood and Communities Grant Program. They combined them into one NOFO, but it doesn't mean that they aren't separate grants. And what specifically about the one for the neighborhood access, that one you can use, for planning and construction. You can use them both, but for the neighborhood one, you're not required to have a local share as long as it's in a the project's in a disadvantaged area. So anyways, that one is September 23rd is application deadline. And then another one is that Federal Highways, we have a notice out for public comment. So it's out, it came out on August 31st, and the closing deadline is October 2nd. And what we would like is we're going to be required to get information from states and NPOs regarding their planning and research work programs, progress reporting, and then financial reporting. So this is an opportunity for you all to make comments on that as an NPO. And then also, let's see, there was a publishing that came out, a report. It was called Review of State DOT Approaches to Distribute Federal PL Funds to NPOs. So this is about ways that the states and NPOs can do like self-assessment to see if there are other ways that you can do distribution of PL funds to NPOs. And then outside of that, specifically for the Asheville NPO, or the French Broad River NPO rather, we will be doing a certification review. And so it happens every 4 years with all TMAs, and with its FTA and FHWA. And it's just a review of the transportation planning processes to ensure that the NPOs are, following them as they should, these processes. We have our own desk review where we spend a couple of months reviewing all the documents and everything like that. And then we'll continue with an on-site review or interview. It's not really interview, it's just a conversation. And then we'll also have public comments. What? It's a conversation. Which will culminate into a report, and then we'll have our finding of whether we feel like the NPO has been following these transportation planning processes that are federally required. It'll come out with showing commendations, like what the NPO is doing so awesomely well, and then recommendations, some things that they could do to improve, and then there's the other stuff, which is, you've done this completely wrong, you need to fix it ASAP, Well, I don't think we'll have any of that. So, yeah, that's coming up. We expect the on-site to happen in the first 2 weeks in December. And that does seem far away, but it's already almost October, so.
Yeah, I mean, 2025 doesn't even seem far away at this point. But no, that's, the last certification review, the last two certification reviews I've been part of have been really, really helpful in terms of our MPO practices. There's things that I think we had 6 recommendations from our last certification review. No findings, but 6 recommendations that honestly have really helped us improve our practices or plan to improve those practices. I do think there's a number of things that we have to address in the MTP from the last one, but so that'll be really good. And FYI, the North Carolina Association of MPOs recently approved continuing with the current formula for the distribution of PL funds in reference to the report Suzette mentioned. The thing I'll note there is that with the addition of new MPO and with some, I don't want to call it fuzzy math, estimations, we are anticipating that our allocation of PL funds is likely to go down slightly. That is okay for us. We do have the capability of supplementing our PL funding with additional SPBG funds that we flex to PL funds. But just FYI, that was something that was decided recently by the association of MPOs. And one last thing, we do have to have a public meeting as part of the certification review, so we'll get that on the books relatively soon. And come on out and hear about MPO practices. I think the last time we did it, was at, it was at some cafe, and people had wine. It was a nice evening. So we'll get that on the books and get that out relatively soon.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's just a reminder, you know, part of the on-site review is we ask any TCC or TAC members to come and then talk about the transportation planning process, what they think has been going on with the MPO that they like and what they think, you know, could be better. They could do that either there or even at the public meeting too.
Okay, great. Is there any questions? All right, then. Why don't we move on to staff updates and legislative updates?
Okay, I won't go through all of the different subcommittee updates, but I think the main thing to note that in your packet is that this round of prioritization has been delayed by a month. So that was initially set to be an item that was going to come up for final approval for this month's TCC and board. We will be moving that to October. Just to note, the public comment period on that has opened. We've received one public comment so far regarding the intersection of Long Shoals and Brevard Road and the need to address that intersection. Also, the comment came in through the Buncombe County Commissioners regarding the intersection of Ramsey Road and New Leicester Highway. That's an intersection that was recently at least worked on as part of the New Leicester Highway widening, but it's an intersection where folks have noted that it's unsignalized and people coming off of Ramsey Road tend to make left turns on the New Leicester Highway, and there have been several severe crashes that this person witnessed. We are getting some comments on that, but we will be extending that public comment period. We'll send out a notice soon. If you could, within your local government, help to boost that would be much appreciated. Again, a lot of the public comments that we've gotten in the past, we have noticed a very strong correlation with some of our local newsletters and local boosts. Every time I say that, I have to note, Flat Rock, your newsletter, it's got to be the most popular newsletter in the state. Every time that thing goes out, we get a flood of comments. So, again, any help there would be much appreciated, and we'll send that out relatively soon. And again, to the larger point, the projects that we submit into P 7.0, that'll be coming back through the TCC and board in October. Also to note, the prioritization work group at the state level, that includes myself as well as Big Eastland, that is starting a number of ongoing committees. I think there's 4 different committees that will be meeting, and mercifully, I think there is a remote option for those meetings. So we'll be talking about a lot of things to help improve the prioritization process. That's going on as well. In terms of special studies, there are a lot of things on the books and a lot of things that are slowly making their way. The Reed Creek Greenway feasibility study, that is a special study that is underway. There is a public survey that's out that we sent out to, or the City of Asheville's heading out, we hope to boost. With the 2050 socioeconomic projections, we do have a consultant who's selected, and we are putting together the rate sheets and draft scope for NCDOT approval. The CCP and MCP update, we have an RFLOI that's been drafted and is out for comments with Federal Highways and NCDOT. And the Safe Streets for All Regional Action Plan, the RFLOI has been drafted. and we are hoping to get that out relatively soon. There are a lot of studies moving forward. To note, we have kind of had to put the pause on a couple of studies, Patton Avenue and Ridgecrest Connector, just until I think we can get some more clear guidance from NCDOT on some of the contracts there. Those are some of the main things moving forward. In terms of legislative updates, the main thing that I will mention is Senate Bill 512. That is a bill that we discussed at the last board meeting, and it essentially changes a lot of the appointments to the Department of Transportation. It essentially removes all of the current appointments that are mostly made by the governor and makes the appointments by the General Assembly. Those would be based on regions rather than divisions and some other positions. So it's a pretty big shift in terms of how Board of Transportation members are appointed and who they represent. So that is something that passed the House and Senate. The governor recently vetoed it, and so it is going back to the General Assembly for consideration. And I think as one of our board members, Chuck McGrady, noted, it's likely something that, if the veto is overridden, would likely go through the state Supreme Court for further consideration. But certainly something with big ramifications with the Board of Transportation. And also just to note, at least as last time I checked, we don't have a state budget. There are, I think, a couple of items within the state budget pertaining to some specific projects within our region, but that is something we'll just keep an eye on for now. And the last thing to note is ASHA sent out a notice for Wednesday, September 20th. That is an event being held by the Metro Mayors Coalition to discuss the possibility of expanding passenger rail in North Carolina. Just as a reminder, that's something that NCDOT is currently working on a feasibility study for. The draft version came out in June. That is something where we have rail upgrades to return passenger rail to Western North Carolina, and Asheville specifically, as well as a planned stop in Black Mountain. That is one of our draft P7.0 projects. And that is a project that NCDOT also submitted for the FRA Corridor ID program, which I believe is supposed to come out sometime in the next month or two.
Before the end of the year.
Before the end of that's the statement. So NCDOT did submit 12 different rail projects for the Corridor ID program. Any projects that are successful would get funding to begin environmental work. So again, the potential expansion to Western North Carolina is one of those projects. And that's something where we are optimistic, at least as of now, about chances of that moving forward. But yeah, that is all I've got.
All right. Well, thank you all for attending today. Do we need to do another public comment query?
Yes, we do.
Is there any public comment at this time? All right. Well, we'll be here again next month if you want to comment then. So.
Hey, Vicky has something to say.
William, one second. I'm not the public, but I do want to make a comment. I think most of you know this is Scott's last TCC meeting.
Yeah.
So, Scott, we appreciate all your efforts and things you've done for the region, for transportation.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
very much.
Thank you, Vicky. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, a few months ago, I tasked Scott with the wildlife crossings, and just to note, Scott's response was, well, I'm no wildlife crossings expert, so I'm not totally sure about this. I think given the presentation and all the work Scott has done, Scott, you've made yourself an expert.
He's a new wildlife crossing.
So, yeah, Scott, best of luck moving forward, and much appreciation for everything you've done for us.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks so much.
Indeed. Thank you, Scott. And with that, we will stand adjourned. See you next month.
Thanks, folks.